The words Eastern European post-apocalyptic shooter may conjure up some of the most disturbing images of absolute horror from the depths of your supple, innocent mind. However, within this subgenre consisting of 90% trollop, there is in fact one game series that has heard the word Polish. Polish. The Metro series is a series of games based fairly loosely on books by Dmitry Glukovsky, and created on an original proprietary engine. Both Metro 2033 and Metro Last Light hold a decent position on my very exclusive list of games that I like more than a taste of hummus. The first game was a clunky, poorly paced and terribly voice acted affair that happened to be one of the most deeply atmospheric games I've ever played, with its Ranger Hardcore mode being the exact brand of self-loathing cock and ball torture that I happen to absolutely love. I feel that its sequel, Last Light, is an almost complete improvement in every sense. It's a tighter, smoother feeling game with incredible tension building, somewhat okay voice acting, and 3 visible breasts total. It was also a game so visually impressive that it more than holds up now, 7 years later, with absolutely incredible lighting and weapon models. This second game, however, was criticised for its move away from the hardcore nature of the first game, with more plentiful ammo, an increased action focus, and 3 visible breasts total. That brings us to Metro Exodus, a game that puts its atmospheric nature at risk with a move towards something more resembling an open world than a cramped metro tunnel. The moment I launched this game, I started to like it. It begins with this beautiful cutscene depicting characters and monsters from the game rendered in snow like the Stardew Valley Ice Festival, and then lands on one of Metro's very nice main menu screens. Every one of these games has a main menu screen that sets the mood and atmosphere of the games perfectly, and this one is no exception. This may seem like a small thing, but a main menu screen is akin to a fast food menu. It tells you what to expect. Yeah, maybe your burger will look like this when it comes, but at the end of the day the intention is that you get this quarter pounder with cheese and medium fries for just $1.99. Now we need to set something straight here. I'm only a pussy bitch in real life, so I shove this shit on Ranger Hardcore, and that's how I play these games. I would say that's the way it's meant to be played, but that would be a lie because so clearly this game was not designed with this difficulty in mind, but we'll talk about that later. The game starts by placing you in a familiar location, the Metro, and immediately the atmosphere is laid on thicker than the girlfriend I don't have. Immersion is absolute and immediate. On Ranger mode there is no HUD and almost all of RTM's inventory actions are animated. The map is physical, your journal is physical, you manually change gas mask filters, you heal with an animation, open doors with an animation, you wipe grime off your mask. Crafting is done physically by bringing out your backpack. Hell, if you could piss in this game you would need to manually shake RTM's knob clean. It is this attention to absolute immersion that makes you truly absorb into the world of Metro, and it's also what makes you shit your pants at the spiders.
Oh my god, what is that? Oh my god! What is that?
At every turn this game is trying to absorb you into its world. Things like the need to replace gas mask filters and clean your firearms aren't just needless busywork. They are used to keep you interacting with the reality this world is trying to present. It makes the guns you carry feel more like tangible objects that exist within the world. I would have totally lost myself in this game if it wasn't for the hundreds of copies of the bloody books scattered across the game world like loose glitter on a strip club floor. This immersion is why most of the footage you'll see in this video is of me sucking up the atmosphere rather than fighting all the time. Plenty of footage of me fucking dying though. The story is set up rather quickly. Basically, Artyom thinks there are people living outside of Moscow, and well, he's right. We are introduced to our 2 returning supporting characters, the infamous shapeshifter called Miller, who now looks like Kelsey Grammer, or possibly the head teacher from that one Netflix show about blowjobs, and his daughter, Artyom's wife, an all-round cardboard person, Anna. I won't explain why for fear of spoilers, but basically the whole plot of the game revolves around her, and yet she still remains entirely uninteresting. There is also a whole host of bro-dude friends from the Rangers, who basically have no character between them, but I will describe them now all one by one. Big, American, Asian, who? Horny. Artyom, I upgraded your gun. Cocky. There are also 4 others who join you on your journey in some sort of permanent capacity. This seems to be an attempt at a sort of ensemble cast. However, almost none of these characters are fleshed out beyond their initial base characteristics. Really, for the sake of the plot, the only characters that matter are Anna and Miller, and for the sake of gameplay, Demir, Duke and Alyosha are somewhat relevant. The voice acting in these games is a controversial issue, and by controversial issue I mean it's often shit. The first game's voice acting was...
My brother is in hospital.
Awful, and most people who play that game regularly will play it with Russian voice acting for this reason. The second game's voice acting was much better.
Here, you keep the knife.
The characters at least had emotions, but still the play it in Russian attitude remained. In this game I'd say it's about the same as the second game, but sweet god, some of it is fucking dreadful. Especially the child character.
Teddy? Teddy! Are you really back? You're my hero, Teddy!
Whose idea was this? As far as the important characters go though, it's mostly good, but the translation is often fucky at best. Russian doesn't translate into English very well. Structurally speaking, they are completely different languages, so this is expected. Ironically enough, the least immersive thing about this story is the language the story itself is told in. Structurally, the opening part of Exodus is your typical Metro affair, a series of short, linear segments that can be approached either through stealth or through all-out war. Press T for gas mask filter, press E for door, press D to drink vodka. The game feels fantastic. After I did my first Ranger hardcore playthrough to validate my fragile masculinity, I replayed the game on normal mode and went full guns blazing to really feel how the shooting feels. And it's buttery smooth. Hell, it's not even just butter, it's akin to a tub of Lurpak you've left out on the patio for like an hour and a half. Aiming feels responsive and about as one-to-one as you could wish, and the recoil is high enough to feel like it fits within the tone of the game, but low enough to still remain fun. Combat is further enhanced by the stunning visual and environmental effects this game has to show off, as well as the wonderful Fear-style combat dialogue that this game has, where enemies call to each other with much more specific details than in most games, which certainly gives the illusion of intelligence. The thing that lets the combat sections down a bit, however, is the movement. We may be a far cry from the original game's version of Artyom, who controlled like a sofa being rolled around on ball bearings and got stuck on walls more often than he spoke, but Artyom still has his quirks. I found myself getting caught on little things like bumps in the floor or small rocks that you could pass over in another game. This didn't happen frequently enough to ruin the game, but it did happen enough that I thought to mention it, so that has to mean something. Like, really, what do you want from me? I'm not a games critic, I'm just an asshole. The weapon selection is as you'd expect. You have a sniper rifle, a few shotguns, a revolver, and of course Mother Russia's greatest export, the Kalashnikov.
It's the weapon of choice for a revolution, and the backbone of any insurgency.
I would have liked a little more variety, even if it would have been effectively redundant. I personally would have killed for this little puppy from Last Light to make an appearance. The relatively small arsenal is helped by the weapon modding system though, which is now deeper than ever and could be done on the move. For example, before an encounter you can retool your short-range rapid-fire AK into a slow-firing sniper rifle thing, and all things in between, and this is very welcome. A small problem with this is that you can be the jack of all trades in most situations. If you can change the configuration of your weapons with no restrictions, then you basically have no trade-offs. It can make you feel more like Inspector Gadget than a rough-and-tumble survivor in a possibly apocalyptic Russia. In the previous games, the modding of your weapons felt like you were making a commitment, and some of that has been lost. There is weirdly a New Game Plus option that limits your ability to mod weapons to a workbench, but by that point I've played the game, dude, so I'm not going back. The other side of the coin when talking about combat is of course stealth. The Metro series has a pretty rocky history with stealth, and in this game it's not wholly better. You still have wonderful stealth mechanics like using light and sound to tip the balance in your favour, but the series tradition of having every enemy in the area know your exact GPS location if one guy smells your unwashed grundle through a wall is still alive and well. One thing I was pleasantly surprised by is that almost every area in the game's open world segments feels like it was designed with attention to both the guns blazing and sneaky git approach. Add to this the fact that you can sleep to either approach an area in cover of night or in the daylight, and you have a great open world system that allows you to approach things as you see fit, and values player freedom. This can't be said about the linear levels, but it was nice nonetheless. One thing that may have affected my opinion about those linear segments is my enlightened elite gamer decision to play on Ranger Hardcore mode. And this is the part where I talk about how this game was clearly not designed with this difficulty mode in mind. Ranger Hardcore mode is about both resource management and playing as a man with glass bones and barely set angel delight for skin. Because of these two factors, the entire combat experience within any given scenario is either about getting through in complete stealth, or by thinning out the numbers through enough stealth to tip the odds in your favour when the firefight breaks out. This works wonderfully in the more freeform sections of the game that allow you to be methodical. However, in these linear segments that make up the game's other half, this privilege is stripped away. A perfect example of this is this section where you must defend a room with minimal cover against waves of enemies, most of which have shotguns which, on Ranger Hardcore mode, will kill you in a single hit. I had to pull the most convoluted gamer brain Rick and Morty Donald Trump 12D chess shit to finish this section, and honestly the game's commitment to immersion was blasted apart more violently than this guy's brainstem. Maybe you can say it's my fault for playing on this difficulty, but these sneaky little Ukrainian goblins put the option right there in the menu. What should I do, not click it? Pushing that lengthy and pointless tangent to the side, let's cover the game's structure. The game takes you through 6 levels, areas, stages, sections. Honestly, call them what you like as long as it's not something like Fat Willies, because I'm sensitive and that will hurt my feelings. Personally, I would label 3 of these major sections and the other 3 as minor sections. Major meaning that it's more of an open world section that lasts a comparatively longer time, and minor meaning the opposite of that. Keep up. Each of these areas has its own unique setting and usually a unique gameplay element to differentiate them. After your first level in Moscow, which is a very Metro Last Light affair, you find yourself in the first major stage. This Fat Willy is the Volga, and this is really the point where I stopped to think, oh sweet goddess, this game is the good graphic. Hell, I even tried turning on this little button.
I hate it so much, and I'm tired of it. I'm so tired of it. I've been taking shit for so long, and I'm not doing this anymore.
The 4A engine has always been very impressive. Whatever ancient Slavic alchemy that is at play here has to be some of the most potent stuff. I don't know if they imbued the engine with the blood of the innocent, or they were just talented coders who knew what they were doing, and I don't think we'll ever truly know what's going on there. Since the first Metro game, this engine has been used to provide some of the most breathtaking visuals with comparatively stellar performance time and time again. This game is no exception. It looks as good as a first-rate cosplayer, or a whole roast dinner served on a naked woman like at a Japanese business meeting, except the woman is actually Courtney Gears from Ratchet & Clank 3. And yet, it runs as smooth as freshly woven silk on my PC. Not so much on my old PC, it ran like pickled knob cheese on that old junker. The thing is, when you get a little close, the texture quality is pretty piss poor in a lot of places. This game is yet another in an incredibly long list of testaments to good lighting and effects. You know, the kind of games that YouTubers will jack off about in video essays for 2 hours. The gimmick of the Volga is boats. That is like a car, except in the water. This area is a series of interconnected landmasses that you can either traverse by either finding bridges and paths, or by boat. This area is dense with locations crawling with enemies, both the human, non-human, and used-to-be human varieties. These locations are there to provide you with rare equipment upgrades with things like night visions, or raw resources like ammo, medkits, and grenades. Having a reward system that gives you much needed supplies or gear pieces is a way to retain that immersion that I won't shut the fuck up about, whilst retaining that tried and tested Ubisoft-esque open world design with rewards littered around like delicious half-eaten Big Macs. But there is a deeper and more widely criticised reason for these locations. For you to farm arbitrary moral points to magically affect which ending of the game you get. This game, to its credit, does this so much better than its predecessor though. Most of the moral actions you do have some reasonable connection to the decisions of certain characters at the end of every major section. And to avoid spoiling things here, I will give the softest example possible. If you save all the slaves in the game's second major section, then one of your crewmates will decide to stay with you on your journey. If you don't, he won't come with you. There are 3 such occurrences where a member of your crew will either leave or stay, and if you get at least 2 of the 3, then you get the game's good ending. You get less than 2, and you get the bad ending. So yes, it's better than the last game's play 7 guitars so the teleporting monkey saves you from nuclear bomb, but a few of these things are still a little needlessly specific. The Volga has you fighting bandits, zombies, and fish, and stealing a rail car for your crew's needs before assaulting a cultist base and yeeting on out of there. After the Volga, you go to a place called Yamantau, which is very hard to talk about without spoilers, although the twist was very easy to see coming. So I'll just say it was a short-lived linear shooting segment with minor plot developments and some very heavy-handed storytelling. So it's a part of this game. There's nothing particularly new here gameplay-wise, except it's your first encounter with one of these killer from Tarkov-looking juggernaut enemies that are horribly balanced on Ranger Hardcore mode. After Yamantau, we visit the Caspian.
Ah, look at that. Best part.
Another major section like the Volga. The Caspian gets its name from the fact that a large part of this section is in the dried up bed of the Caspian Sea, with fresh oil just sitting there for the taking for the section's bad guys, the oil barons, who are your typical slaver bandit types. This area gives you a sick-ass van to drive about in, and for this reason it's the most expansive part of the game. This area has tons of small locations for you to explore, and a whole list of small interactions for you to find. The main plot of this area has you teaming up with a character called something, who is an ex-slave and I suppose freedom fighter, and she is a character who is given the honour of directing you towards the game's first spider section. Because by God, you can't have a Metro game without a fucking spider section. I hate these sections, in a good way. Horror in video games is far too often a case of jump scare nonsense that has more in common with roller coasters than a ghost attack.
Oh my god, this game is scary.
And I must preface this by saying I am as scared of spiders as I am of human interaction. These sections in the Metro games are some of the most pure and condensed horror in gaming.
What Wait, spiders?
There is a deeply creepy and uncomfortable atmosphere the entire time. The way that they try to ambush you and pop out of every corner, combined with the fact that they are pretty resistant to damage, makes them truly scary. There is also the fact that light is your only true defense from them, which makes you cherish light so much in these encounters, which means that when the game decides to turn the lights out, it instills a genuine sense of panic in you. This game's spider section has you crawling through vents at one point, and I've decided that is what hell looks like in my own personal universe. After some great struggles, we move on through a few plot segments and end up in the Taiga, the final open worldish major section. The gimmick here is that the game pulls a The Pit on you and takes all your shit away, and gives you a sick ass crossbow. It's a shame that to get the good ending in this section you basically have to never shoot the bloody thing. This area is easily the least expansive open world area in the game. You meet pretty lady, eat hot chip, fight bear, and have a tea party with dead people. All the staples of Russian living. The gameplay here is definitely more stealth focused than the rest of the game, which isn't super apparent to me since I was using stealth the entire time, but the whole giving you only a crossbow and littering the area with hostile yet innocent enemies was definitely a cue to the player that this was expected of them here. The level design also reflects this intention. The different camps and caves have a much more interconnected snaking design that lends itself to stealth gameplay. That is of course not to say you can't blast your way through this area like George Bush in the Middle East, but I feel like you'd have a slightly worse experience here than in the game's other 2/3. It's also no surprise that this is the part of the game they chose to reveal the game with, because it is pretty as all hell. But other than that, there's not much to say about this section, and really that makes it feel like it's perhaps the game's weakest section. Nothing really happens that feels of note, and for that reason it's fairly forgettable. There are some ups, and the shooting is hot shit fire as it is in every other part of the game, and you get a crossbow. A fucking crossbow? But by comparison it feels a lot weaker than, say, the Caspian. Anyway, there's one more part to talk about. The Dead City. This part is essentially one of the really good bits from Metro 2033. It's a linear, handcrafted experience where you're trudging your way around bombed out ruins in a truly inhospitable environment. This is the city of
Novosibirsk.
which is said in-game to have far higher radiation levels than that of Moscow, which is, if you haven't played these games, an absolute shithouse. This city is entirely uninhabited by humans. The only life that remains here are heavily mutated animals like the blind ones, enemies that give me such heavy librarian vibes I first mistook them for librarians. No, not those ones, those ones. The blind ones are, as the name suggests, blind, and they can only locate you via sound and smell, which leaves you crawling around on your hands and knees like some weekend whore, shitting your pants the entire section. And as if that wasn't bad enough, they whisper to you telepathically the entire time like you're crawling through broken glass in the ASMR dimension. There's a lot of walking here and not a lot of shooting, because it is a very plot-heavy segment. I've decided to avoid spoilers, but I will say that this game's plot is about as good as the plot of Last Light. 2033 remains the game with the most interesting stakes, even if the ending to the book was better. So in conclusion, this game is hot. It is well oiled, toned, and positively sexy as all fuck. It's an incredibly tight shooter with passable stealth, okay story, and surprisingly good graphical fidelity. It has an atmosphere that's so thick you'd have a hard time cutting it with a rotary saw, and it has a commitment to immersion so uncompromising it might as well be a politician. If you have ever wanted to play this game, or have a vague interest in the game that sucks you in harder than sex, joke, then give this a go. Don't pay too much for it though, it went on sale for like £14 when I got it. I give Metro Exodus a...
Tylko jedno w głowie mam.